Welcome to Potomac Watch, the daily podcast of Wall Street Journal Opinion.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
I'm Paul Gigot, and today my special guest is Suzy Welch. She is a journalist and author, former editor of the Harvard Business Review, and now a professor of management practice at New York University's Stern School of Business. She is also the author of, among other books, Becoming You, The Proven Method for Crafting Your Life and Career. She's here today to talk about a provocative research into the different values and experiences of Generation Z, which she teaches at Stern and that generation, and what employers want in employees. She distilled these findings in a very provocative essay in the Wall Street Journal, headlined, "Is Gen Z Employable?" Maybe a too provocative headline.
No, tell me. Very provocative. I think, "Is Gen Z unemployable?" is the headline, and it was like a lightning bolt. So
yeah, it was the most read essay of our opinion pages in the last month. So congratulations on that and welcome.
An honor. Thank you.
So why don't you start by summing up what you found in your research, because it really is striking.
Absolutely. Well, we have a tool at Becoming You Labs, which is the lab that I'm very happy to run at NYU Stern. And the tool, called the Values Bridge, allows individuals to have their values ranked from 1 to 16. There's 16 human personal values. And after we made this tool available to the public in May, it ended up that now, at this point today, 70,000 people have taken it, but about 70,000 people. People are curious about what their values are, it turns out. But about a month ago, about 45,000 people had taken it, and we were aware that we had enough data then to start looking at values by generation. Now, I had strongly suspected what the values of Gen Z were already, because I'm teaching them all the time, and because I have been using this tool in beta with my classes for several years now. So we finally got that data put together, and we had Gen Z's values ranked from 1 to 16, and I could see it was really kind of no surprise to me that their number one value is eudaimonia, which I'll explain. This is a Greek term. It's the Greek term for flourishing. And what goes into this term is really self-care, pleasure, recreation. And the reason why we don't call it self-care is because I try to be non-judgmental, and I didn't want people's heads to explode by saying, look, Gen Z, their number one value is self-care. And this piece already got enough sound and fury associated with it.
Sounds like narcissism.
Yes, it does. And in fact, this value has been tested before by previous generations. There's another academic construct that is tested, and they call it hedonism. Okay, but we use this other term.
Hedonism has a more negative connotation than eudaimonia. Sure.
And I don't want a negative connotation. Yeah. So their number one value is eudaimonia. The number two value is what we call voice, which is individual authentic self-expression, to allow their insides on the out, just so that they can be themselves. And then their third value is what we use a Latin term, non sibi, not for oneself, to mean sort of like altruism, but they like helping people. After I saw these results, I was like, yeah, I get it. I've seen it. Not surprised at all by the eudaimonia, which is a predominant 75% have that as a top value. I said, I wonder, just out of curiosity, since my students are MBAs and because young people are generally looking for jobs, what are the values that are being sought after most by hiring managers? So at the lab, we conducted a second study of 2,100 hiring managers with more than 5 years of experience. And we looked basically for jobs in business, so in the knowledge industries. And we gave them a list of the values and their definitions. And we said, please pick your top value. And when it was all done, we crunched the numbers. And what came out of the crunching was that that hiring managers are looking for the values of achievement, learning, and work centrism, which is the desire just to work.
Work hard.
Yeah, work hard. Okay, which I happen to have that value, so no shade on it. I happen to love that value. And if you put it all together, what ends up is that only 2% of Gen Z have the values that hiring managers most prize, that they're most seeking. 2%. And we at the lab, we're human beings. So when the data was being crunched, we were all sort of placing bets on what we thought the number would be. And I said, look, I'm with these Gen Z day in and day out. I think it's going to be 10%. And everybody said, that's very low, Suzy. And I said, I think it's going to be 10%. And then it came back 2.04%. And I thought, wow, so we replicated it because we thought that's a very, very low number. And it replicated, it was 2.03% when we replicated it. And so we knew that the data was strong. And there you have it.
That's remarkable. Now, is there a potential issue with the selection of the data set, that is the people? In other words, are these 45,000, now 70,000 people who have relatively affluent upbringings, who therefore feel more comfortable, and they don't have that sense of desperation that a lot of people who live on the margins have?
Yes, of course, this is an excellent question. And we were worried about selection bias. So we made sure we didn't have selection bias in the data. And so we used a system called Prolific to make sure that the data represented the American public in terms of age, income level, gender, and race. So we took out the selection bias to make sure that we didn't have exactly what you describe.
Yeah, because in my experience of hiring and just in life, the hardest workers overall tend to be the people from middle class and working class backgrounds, particularly those who rise. They go to college because I hire people who have gone to college, and what they have going for them is they're a little bit looking behind over their shoulder and saying, geez, I really have to work hard because I don't know what's going to happen to me. I haven't had an easy life.
That's right.
And so they're the ones that work hard, and others who have, feel they have a cushion, and therefore they may not be as achievement oriented.
Yes, I mean, I think that you make a good point. And I think the next step for us is to cut this data by, the first way we're going to cut it is by first generation and immigrants and compare it to people who have.
Interesting.
Right. So we're doing that right now to look at the data that way. So I do think it's hard to make generalizations on what that might look like, because look, I'm in the classroom, and this desire, this motivating eudaimonia is strong across all the students. And of course, in my NYU classroom, I have students who come from middle class and working class backgrounds, and first generation immigrants. And I have to say, I don't want to make generalizations. The data will tell us. That's what I'm going to say right now.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, what do you attribute this shift in values across generations? Because I think it is a shift.
Yeah.
I mean, what has happened to this generation that causes them to have these values?
Okay, I first want to have a disclaimer here. So in my field, which is values in social science, there are two different fields of it. And one is values formation, how you come by your values. And that's filled with psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists. And then the field that I'm in is values expression, what values we have, and then how we express them. So I want to say I'm stepping out of my field, which is values expression. I study what people's values are and how much they're living them or not. All right. And so I can only, like you as a layperson, say, how did they come by these values? Well, I can just look at my own 4 children. They came by their values, by their society, by culture, by their parents, by their friends. And I think there's a big stew. Now, if you ask my students, why do you have these values? They would say 2 things. They would say the pandemic.
Big impact.
Big impact. And then they would say, you created a world for us, you oldsters, where there's terrorism and school shootings and climate change, and you've created this terrible world, and we don't want to work hard to in your terrible world, and then find out we're at age 40 where we've killed ourselves to sort of climb the corporate ladder, and then we're just going to be fired or we're going to be out of a job because you created this terrible no-win economy. So that is what my students would say. My students would say the pandemic made us realize that you cannot postpone joy. That's what my students would say.
So no postponing your spending money or sacrifice. Take a job you might not love because you're going to develop a skill set that will help you when you're 35.
I mean, it's a kind of nihilism where they basically say, none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow. There could be a pandemic, or there could be a technology who takes my job. There's no bargain anymore, where if you work hard, you're going to get a payoff from it. You're going to be rewarded for it. So why would I buy into a deal that doesn't exist anymore? And when they say it, look, maybe they're right. I mean, when I was coming up and along, I saw with my own eyes that if you were like my parents and you worked incredibly hard, then your kids went to college, and it was a deal I was willing to make. I was willing to buy into that deal, and I postponed a lot of joy by working 8 days a week when I was coming up and along. But then again, I still do that. And so I think it's actually an authentic value of mine. I know it is because I took the test, but it is. It's like my third value.
So I want to ask you about one particular kind of commentary on your article, which I've heard from many, many people, which is that, well, what do you expect? They're young people. Young people have this sort of sense of they can afford to indulge these values because they don't have to work for a living yet.
Yeah.
And once they work for a living and they realize that if they don't have achievement as a goal, if they don't have working hard as a goal, never mind what, they could lose their job at 40. If they don't work in this job hard, they're not going to have any chance to succeed.
Right. So this is the bucket of comments I would say is like, don't worry about them. They're going to get their butts kicked anyway. Just hang in there for a few years. They're going to learn this the hard way.
Exactly.
Okay. I think that there's a portion of that. I think that is too facile a response to it. I mean, 2% is a very small number. And I think that was probably, that probably applies to some portion of them, but we're talking about a 98-2% split. Okay. So I don't think 98% just need to grow up a little bit. I think maybe 10% are going to change.
Mm-hmm.
I think the rest, I think there's a cultural phenomenon going on. And I think the magnitude is you just can't write off the magnitude of this result.
Okay, so you say in your piece that you tell your students about this disconnect between what their values are and what the workplace hiring managers' values are, even if they don't want to hear it.
Yes.
So how do they respond?
They don't like it very much. Now, I want to say for the record, because I am teaching at a very good business school, my students actually skew higher than this actual number. Like if I pulled out Stern, there's probably no Stern students in the data that I have because this is a general population study.
Higher than 2%.
Yeah, I'm going to say because these are MBAs, okay? There's the Sternies. But I would say when I tell them this, they are grim because the job market's hard. Even for MBAs today, it's hard. And they're like, the last thing they want to hear from me is, and none of you have the values that hiring managers want anyway. And so when I say it, it's grim. There's kind of a quiet unhappiness in the room, and they don't like it. And then I say to them things like, look, you have two choices with what I'm saying. You can go into job interviews and identify yourself as being part of the 2%. Hi, I'm part of that 2%. I have achievement. I have everything you want. I've got achievement, I've got learning, and I've got work centrism, and use it to your advantage.
Right.
And the other is that you can go look for a company that is going to accommodate your current values. What I don't suggest they do is change their values. I think it's like asking someone to change their personality. I mean, they have to, okay, maybe they can go repress their values for a while, but that's very uncomfortable. When you're not living your values, you're like wearing a suit that's the wrong size. So I think that their choice is to go find companies that don't have the kind of hiring power. Now, the companies with really big hiring power, the Goldman Sachs, the JP Morgans, the Disneys, the Sonys, I mean, the really big brand names, they can go find those 2%. And when I've been hearing from CEOs since the article was published, and they say things like, we spend all our time looking for the 2%. Or as one executive said to me, this is a cage match worth fighting. It's whether we win or lose is whether we get those 2%.
Yeah.
But if you don't have leverage in hiring, then maybe you're going to be a company that is going to accommodate the 98%, and those companies and the 98% need to find each other.
All right. When you write in your piece, that's one reaction from the students you give this message to is that they say, oh, well, business must change. Well, across my career, business has changed. I mean, we have much more family leave, generous family leave. It's for fathers as well as mothers. It's extensive weeks, certainly at the Journal it is.
Yeah.
And, long vacations. I mean, personal days. And, I know in my own role as a manager, I try to be very accommodating, in particular to young parents, because obviously those are, very intensive, time-consuming years. and I know they're going to come out of it and be productive in the future. So business has changed.
It has.
How else do they want business to change? When
Yes.
they say business must change, well, what do they want?
Okay, so business has changed. My son just took 6-month paternity leave after his son was born. And, he got tired of me saying, I had a case team meeting for Bain in the hospital. I was working at Bain when my 4th child was born, and my case team came to the hospital and we had a case team meeting in the hospital. Okay. And he's like, I don't want to hear it anymore, Mom. And I said, yeah, but like 6 months is so gorgeous. So how much more can change? I think that what, if I had to, I don't want to sort of make a generalization, but now I'm about to do that, is that if they would like a mindset that is more thoroughly focused on the well-being of employees and so much less on the shareholders. And what I teach a management class called Management with Purpose. And in the first day in class, I say to my students, what I'm going to teach you in this class is about the big win. The big win is when you're a manager who's beloved by your team, and you're also beloved by the shareholders. This is the most unspeakably hard thing you'll ever do. And this is, you work your whole career to be at the center. I show a little Venn diagram and I say, this is where you want to be. In some weeks, you're going to be loved by your team, but then results may not show for it. And
Right.
to find that balance. And so I think what they'd like is, in their perfect world, is that the shareholders would, and by shareholders, I mean customers, your boss's boss, whatever, that they would diminish. It wouldn't be a 50-50 split, okay? That it wouldn't be 50% beloved by your team, 50% beloved by shareholders, but it would be something more like 90% beloved by your team, 10% beloved by your shareholders. I think that that's the frontier that they're looking for, and maybe they're right.
But would they be willing to accept less compensation? Because obviously the relationship between shareholders and customers and performance relates to corporate performance, relates to the ability to pay people.
I very often I get a student who comes up to me and says, Professor Welch, I have eudaimonia as my number one value, but my second value is affluence, okay, the desire to be rich. And they say, is that a problem? And I say, do you promise not to shoot the messenger? I have to sort of break it to them that
if you want the house in Nantucket,
right.
You got to do certain things.
So I think that you ask, this is the $1 billion question. Will they take less compensation? Look, they're young, and so they don't want to. They would like both.
I would like both.
Maybe we did too when we were young. Maybe. We just didn't think it was possible.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't get it. I understood the trade-off. I thought maybe because my parents told me.
All right. So when you are talking to business people who've read this,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's the message to them? Hiring managers, CEOs, HR departments, people who have to hire.
Okay, I have not yet received any communication from somebody in business who's been surprised by this data. What they've said is, yep, this is exactly what I've been experiencing. Thank you for actually quantifying it. And I've heard everything from, I thought it was 5% to, I thought it was 1%. Okay. But most people in business who I've heard from have been like, yes. And I think it goes back to what we said earlier. The implications for them are, how do we find the 2% earlier? I don't hear anybody saying, how do we accommodate the 98%? But maybe it's the people I'm talking to. I think people want the 2%.
Well, sure. Everybody would want, anybody who wants to succeed as a manager and as a corporate executive would want the 2% because they're going to be self-sacrificing. They're going to work the 70-hour week or the 60-hour week. Yeah. They're going to say to their family, sorry, I got to be away today.
Yeah.
Managers are going to want that. But if only the companies with the most leverage can get that, then what do the others have to do? How can they have to provide a 4-day work week? Is that what people want? Do they have to give do they have to give ownership, partial ownership, shares as a
all
form
of the above? I think they're going to just have to look. They're already doing it. You're lowering your standards for what you expect, and you're kind of quietly groaning about it and complaining about it with other people your age, saying, mm-hmm. This is driving me out of my mind. I received an email from a person who identified themselves as being Gen Z and said, look, I get achievement, wanting people with achievement. I get wanting people with wanting to learn, which we call scope. But is work centrism really even a value? Who could possibly want to work? I think you've made up this value and it doesn't actually exist. And I think, okay, I looked at it and I tried not to be judgmental about it. And I think that that kid is going to end up working someplace, and his bosses are going to have to learn to live with it, because what choice do you have? You have to have jobs done. I think there's going to be what's going on right now, which is just there will be a kind of emotional accommodation for it, and not happily.
These young people understand that with artificial intelligence arriving on the scene and corporate executives all over the country looking for ways to substitute AI for salaries, let's be blunt.
Yes.
Do they realize they're not going to have the same leverage that maybe they might like?
Not yet. I don't think they understand it yet. Like when I speak to my students about this, I say, this is urgent because jobs are going away. So it was already hard for you to get a job.
Mm-hmm.
Now it might even be harder for you to get a job. Do you want to be in the bucket of people who have a higher chance because you have the values that they want? Or are you going to stay where you are with your values? And I understand it. People don't want to change their values. Why would they? It's like asking you to, as I said, change your personality.
Well, but
so
if you have to, you have to.
Right. Eventually, they're going to want to pay for their kid to go to school, or they're going to want to buy a new car. And they may say, but I think, I don't want to catastrophize, but I definitely think a reckoning is coming, because this is a very big number, and there has to be some kind of conversation. A bridge has to be built between these two groups.
Let's broaden this out a little bit. What are the implications, not just for business, but for a larger American society? We're competing against a culture in China, which I can guarantee you, eudaimonia is not the first
Paul,
value.
I forgot about this. There was a whole wall of comments who came back, said, you should do this with Chinese students and Indian students. Go take your test. They could take it. I mean, go take your test to India and China. You're going to see a different set of values.
I think you would.
And so I think this is gigantic. So this is why politicians have been calling me since the article came out in the journal saying, can we talk about this? Because maybe this is something we should put into education. I do think some of this falls at the feet of parents. I say that as a parent. Is like, are you having this conversation with your kids around the dining room table? Because I do think that for American competitiveness, this data has relevance.
Oh, it absolutely has relevance. I mean, and you can see it in the education results more broadly, where our achievement levels are just are going down.
I know.
For decades.
So maybe it's not so much about education as it is about values, because it's not that the kids aren't learning; it's that they are not wanting to. That's a piece of it. Because they don't see the equation where doing incredibly well in school is going to get them the bargain that used to exist. They think that bargain does not exist anymore.
Is that truly the evidence that bargain doesn't exist for graduates of the Stern School? I mean, I can't imagine that.
But again, these are not my Stern students. I mean, this is a very large study. I don't want to put this on Stern students.
Understood.
Because Stern students, they're special, and like many, I mean, of course I feel that way. But I think it still exists, but maybe they tell me I'm wrong. Like I remember I was working with a young woman on my team, very young, 22 years old. And she said, can you do a social media thing? She said, a reel on burnout. She's 22. And I said to her, I was stunned. I could barely speak. And I said, on burnout? She goes, yeah, my friends and I were just so burned out. And
Did you tell her, wait till you're 52?
I know. I said, let me tell you what it was like when I was 22. I was working at the Miami Herald. I worked 7 days a week. I never took a vacation. I loved it so much. I would have worked 8 days if I could have. And I went on. And she said, yeah, but you had hope. And I thought, is that what it is? We had hope and they have no hope. I still think you can have hope, because I see the people on my team. Of course, I hire all 2 percenters, and we're going to grow all together. And so I think the deal's still there, but maybe I'm wrong.
You and I both work in New York City. We've got a mayoral election coming up. The front runner by far is Zohran Mamdani, self-avowed socialist, overwhelmingly supported by young people.
My children, yes.
And relatively affluent young people. I mean, the people who come in and into New York and work for Google, or they work for Amazon, or they work for all kinds of companies. Are there any implications in your research about how young people feel about capitalism versus socialism?
That's that we're actually going to start adding a question on the to get that. I think that in a way, they've answered with these values, Paul, to be
Sounds
honest
like,
with you.
yeah.
So let me just get very, very specific about that. Achievement, which is the desire for seen success, sort of the capitalism value, is number 11 out of 16 for Gen Z, number 11 out of 16. And then we measure how much more or less of it you want in your life, and 60% want less of it in their life. It's number 11, and 60% would like less of it. So I think that they've answered already with their values.
All right. So when you talk to your business school students about, because you focus so much of your research and on your own instruction on personal flourishing, personal success, what you need to do to really have a fulfilling life and success. What do you tell your students what they need to do?
I tell them there's a methodology for this. I say to them, don't go live your passion. Listen closely. I say, you have to
Don't live your passion.
No. Because okay, I like to sing, but I mean, I'm told in church to stop singing. That's how bad my voice is. So I think, and that's the passion for me, but I can't do it. That makes it a hobby.
Right.
So I say, look, excavate 3 data sets, know what your values are, then find out with ruthless precision what your aptitudes are, what you're good at. Go be tested. Don't guess. Don't ask your mother. Don't ask your roommate. Find out what your cognitive aptitudes are. Are you specialist or a generalist? Are you inductive reasoner, whatever? Find out your aptitudes. You can test for it. And then discover your economically viable interests. This third one is very hard because what happens is the aperture of students gets smaller and smaller. They kind of think, there's 3 conveyor belts. Either I go to consulting, banking, or tech, or whatever. There's like sort of 3 jobs in front of them, teaching or what, and they don't know that there's 135 industries, that there's 12 megatrends, that there are so many jobs they don't think of. When I wrote for the Wall Street Journal 2-3 years ago, about how my students don't go into industry, the CEOs called me up from industry and said, Suzy, we've tried to recruit MBAs. They want nothing to do with us. And what they think is they got to get a high paying job right out the gate. And they don't realize that with industry, if you just plug along, at age 40, you're running a country or you're running a region, and you can really build an amazing career in all sorts of industries. And they don't either it's not there, or they don't have the imagination for it. So I say, I want you to find your purpose. Your purpose is not your passion. Your purpose lies at the intersection of your values, which you may or may not be able to fulfill completely, your aptitudes, which may not be what you like. Okay.
Right.
You may want to be in product, but you may not be a 3D visualizer. I'm sorry.
You may want to be in sales, but you may be don't have
An
a
introvert.
personality
Yes,
for it.
That's right. Right. We test personality because your personality can make or break your job.
Oh, without question.
So we test for that as well. So you got to get tested and find out who you are.
All right. Well, that's excellent advice, and we'll end it there today. Suzy Welch, thanks so much for being here. We are here on Potomac Watch every day. Thank you for listening. Hope to have you with us tomorrow.